Dear student, hopefully you're doing very well. My name is Dr. Sharat Khandaka, and today I will talk about the monetary authorities in Australia. Now, the first slide is about the impact of GFC on financial institutions across the world. If you look at this slide, you'll find that the market value of different banks, large bank in the world, as of January 2007, and then the market value of those companies as of January 2009. If you look at this slide, you'll find some companies such as Citigroup Limited, JP Morgan, HSBC, RBS. So these are the large financial institutions that suffer significantly during the global financial crisis. Now, as we know that during the global financial crisis, several financial institutions suffered a lot. Some of them need to write off a large amount of their assets across the globe. Not only that, there are few large financial institutions, that couldn't even survive from the impact of global financial crisis. So that brings us a question about the regulation of the banking industry. Therefore, this lecture is about. So the first institution that we need to discuss in this lecture is the central banking authority. Now, the central banking authority has a long history that stretches back as far as 17th century. A central bank regulates a nation's money supply and financial institutions. The central bank aim is to maintain a stable economic environment and effective payment system in any country of the world. So when we're talking about the central bank, we're basically talking about the reserve bank or the central bank in that particular country. In this case, we are talking about RBA or the Reserve Bank of Australia. So what are the functions of the central banks? The functions performed by the central bank includes developing and implementing monetary policy, issuing currency, providing banking services for the government, overseeing the operations of the financial system, and the last one is facilitating the payment system. So if you're thinking about all of these functions are strongly correlated, are important for a particular country. For example, developing and implementing monetary policy. If you look into the Reserve Bank of Australia, what are the monetary policy it is implementing? Think about, stretch back 6 months back, and think what are the monetary policy it has been implemented. Australian current cash rate is one of the lowest in history, which is only 1.5% as of 18th of March 2019. So this monetary policy, how it's impacting the overall economy in Australia. So the central bank is also have the authority to issue the currency for the government. So no other bank can issue currency except the central bank, and that's why this is the bank for the government, and it facilitates the payment system for a particular country and overseeing the operation of the financial system. So when we're talking about the monetary authorities in Australia, there are three different independent agencies that are looking after the monetary authority in Australia. Number one is the Reserve Bank of Australia. Number two, Australian Prudential Regulation Authority, which is also called APRA. And number three is the Australian Securities and Investment Commission. All three independent agencies have a very similar role, which is to look after the monetary policy of Australia. Now we look each of these institutions and understand the role in Australian economy. So there are 4 pillars policy in Australia, and these are the main financial institutions. So one is the ASIC, RBA and APRA. And we also have the Federal Treasury, who is also looking after the financial policies and monetary system in Australia. So first we look at the Reserve Bank of Australia. So the history of the Reserve Bank of Australia can go back to 1911, when it was formed as the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, or the CBA. However, the CBA currently we know is not a reserve bank or the central bank, but a commercial bank. So the separation of the commercial banking operation of CBA and its central banking duties has been separated during 1950s. Now this separation has created a separate bank called the RBA, which is finally formed in 1959. So in 1959, the RBA, the Reserve Bank of Australia, and the Commonwealth Bank of Australia separated completely. The responsibilities of the commercial bank of the Central Bank of Australia, which is the RBA, has been adjusted in the light of the report of the Campbell Committee report, which is provided in 1979 and based on the Wills Committee report in 1996. So what does the RBA do? This is a good question. So the main duties of the RBA is to determination and implementation of monetary policy. The second duty is to issuing Australian currency notes. So all the notes that we can see in the market, which has been issued by the Reserve Bank of Australia. The third duty is to overseeing the payment system. Now the payment system what we're looking now, it's much bigger than that. We'll discuss about the payment system in our next slides. Acting as a government banker. So the Australian government do all of its dealing or banking through the Reserve Bank of Australia. Issuing and providing market for the treasury securities. So the Reserve Bank of Australia is the bank for the government, and it issue and provide to the market with the treasury security. And it also manages the financial system liquidity and holding foreign exchange for the government. So as we are talking about the monetary policy, so what is the monetary policy? How does it work? We need to understand that. So the monetary policy is the management of short-term interest rate, and the main objective of the monetary policy is to maintenance of a stable currency, the maintenance of full employment, and the maintenance of the prosperity and welfare of the people of Australia. Now look at this picture. What do you understand? So this is a payment system. Now think about this example. Here you are sitting. Think about an eBay transaction. For example, you would like to buy a DVD player from the eBay and deposited a check for this transaction. How this transaction will take the place? Think about it. So it's online shopping, and from online shopping your money has been transferred from your own bank, and this has gone from your own bank account to the payment system, and the payment made to the another bank, which is the seller bank. Now it has done overnight, so it's not really going straight away to the seller's bank. So to clear the transaction, it will take up to 1 to 2 days, excluding the weekend. So this is coming through the payment system. Though when you go to the computer, you click a button and the payment has gone from your account. For us, it's much easier to understand that the payment has gone, so the transaction has been completed. But in reality, the transaction has not been completed, but just been started. And every day there are millions of transactions which take into place in Australia. So for example, in average monthly transaction includes about 119 million credit card transactions, which worth approximately $17.3 billion. It also includes 157 million IFT post transaction, which worth about $10.7 billion. It also includes 28.9 million of check transaction, which worth about $119 billion. Finally, it also includes 194 million direct debit transactions, which worth about $943 billion. So think about this enormous payment system. This is a gigantic system, which we don't realize it. So the Reserve Bank of Australia, or the RBA, is looking after this payment system for each of these transactions. So the payment system is used to settle millions of transactions each day. And the role RBA plays are basically three roles. One, promoting the efficiencies and stability of the payment system. Number two, providing the facilities for the settlement of transactions. And three is acting in the payment system as a bank of the Australian government. So these are the key roles the RBA plays in the financial market. So when we're talking about the payment system, we do have several different ways the payment system has worked. For example, the stock exchange automated trading system, which is also called SIT system. We also have Chase system, which is called clearing house electronic sub-register system, and we also have Australia system. So these are the payment system which we deal with almost every day. So the structure of RBA. So the RBA is managed and overseen by the Reserve Bank Board. In the board, there are 9 members, including a governor and the secretary to the Department of the Treasury. The board meets 11 times a year, and its main business is to look after the monetary policy. Please remember that board meets 11 times, which means it meets with all the board members every month except in January. Therefore, in December, every single individual is really looking for the interest rate decision by the central bank, because general people knows that the decision will be placed for 2 months rather than in 1 month. So the accountability to the Parliament. So the RBA board is accountable to the Australian Federal Parliament, and the board produces an annual report for the treasurer. However, RBA is not directly under the authority of the government. The governor of the RBA meets regularly with the treasurer and discuss with the potential monetary policy. The second institution in Australia that looking after the monetary policy is the Australian Prudential and Regulation Authority, which is also called the APRA. So APRA was established on July 1st in 1998 by the Australian Prudential Regulation Authority Act 1998, and APRA's responsibility includes the prudential supervision for the banks, insurance companies, and superannuation companies. Now, APRA at a glance. APRA is an independent body. It doesn't report to the government ministers. In 2014 and 15, APRA posted $8.45 million profit. At the same years, the APRA has expenses of $118 million. APRA also employs about 585 people during 2015. So the APRA specific functions include the development and implementation of the prudential regulation to the financial institutions, which includes bank, insurance companies, and superannuation entities. Another main task of APRA is to monitoring these entities to ensure that they are complying with the relevant legislation and prudential policies. And APRA also advise to the government on the development of regulations and legislation which can impact the financial institution in Australia. So the governance of APRA is accountable for its action in several ways to the Australian government. For example, appearance before the Parliamentary Committee. So APRA needs to appear before the Parliamentary Committee on its report. It also submits its annual report to the Parliament. And APRA is audited by the National Audit Office. Now, let's come back to the question again. Responding to the GFC. Now, is it a good luck or is it good management? Now remember, other countries, which includes different types of regulatory authorities, they generally have a central bank. But most of the country, they do not have an institution which is similar to APRA. So APRA, we can say that it is a specialized institution that looking after the depository institution, such as the bank, superannuation entity, and the insurance company. Now, the third institution in Australia is Australian Securities and Investment Commission. So the ASIC is the third regulator in Australian financial sector, which is established in 1991. So the ASIC is responsible for regulating the financial markets, regulating securities, futures, and corporations, and it is also responsible for the consumer protections in superannuation, insurance companies, and deposit-taking or credit institutions. So the main responsibilities of APRA includes also the maintain and facilitate and improve the performance of the financial system and entities within it. It also promotes confident and informed participation by investors and consumers in the financial system. ASIC, another responsibility includes administrate the law effectively within the minimum procedural requirement. ASIC is also responsible to act to enforce and give effect to the law. It reserve, process, and store information that is given to the ASIC. And ASIC make information about the companies and other bodies available to the public as soon as it is practicable. So these are the main responsibilities of ASIC. However, there are other institutions that we can see in the international market, which are largely affect the monetary policy in Australia as well. This institution might include the Bank of International Settlement, the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, and International Monetary Foundation or IMF. So let's look at the number one, the Bank of International Settlement. So the Bank of International Settlement is an international monetary authority based in Basel, Switzerland. The BIS is a facilitator of central banking cooperation. This is accomplished by by providing a meeting place and resources for the meeting of the central bank. So every year the central banks they meet in a place which is for discussion about the monetary policy across its member states. And BIS also act as a bank to the central banks, providing services related to the financial operations. Now remember, the way the central bank is called is the mother of all commercial bank. The same way BIS is the mother of all central banks. Now if you look at this map, you can find the basil is located in this corner. Now this is a very strategic location. Now three most important European countries are located in this corner. So this place, the basil, the location has a border with three different most important European countries. So on the left hand side is the France, and the right hand side is Germany, and the basil is located in Switzerland. Central Bank of China. So the Central Bank of China is the People's Bank of China, or POBC. The POBC is responsible for the monetary policy, currency regulation, developing policy for the financial markets, and facilitating interbank borrowing. The People's Bank of China operates alongside with the China's Bank Regulatory Commission, which performs a role similar to APRA in Australia. So China has a central bank and a similar institution like APRA. However, if you look at Hong Kong is a special administrative region of China. It operates its own central banking system. However, interestingly, Hong Kong doesn't have a central bank. Rather than, the Hong Kong has a principal regulator which is called the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, or HKMA. The HKMA performs many of the functions of typical central bank in Hong Kong. However, it doesn't have a physical central bank. Central banking system in US is much complicated than the Hong Kong or in Australia. The US Federal Reserve System has created around in 1913. The system consists of 7 members board of the governors, 12 regional Federal Reserve banks, 3,000 members commercial banks, and the Federal Open Market Committee. Now remember, the central banking in the USA has 12 Federal Reserve banks which are located several parts of the United States, and it's responsible for clearing and processing payment in order to act as a depository for the banks of their jurisdictions. And these 12 Federal Reserve Bank, they participate in making monetary policy. This is to note that the Federal Open Market Committee, or FOMC, consists of 7 board members plus 5 presidents of the Federal Reserve Banks. This committee determines monetary policy, and the Federal Reserve Bank of New York implement the policy to day-to-day basis. And the last slide is on about the central bank in New Zealand, which is our neighboring country. The central banking system in New Zealand is very similar to Australia. However, there is no equivalent of APRA in New Zealand. So in New Zealand, the central bank is performing the duty of RBA as well as the APRA. In New Zealand, the Reserve Bank of New Zealand is responsible for the monetary policy, systematic stability, and the prudential regulation. Thank you very much for listening to my lecture today. I hope that you enjoy my lecture, and please do not forget to subscribe my YouTube channel. Thank you very much.